Welcome everybody to the. Is my sign okay? No? Good? No. Okay. Welcome everybody to this workshop. Please find a seat if there's any left. We should be. There are 54 registered people to this workshop, so it fits exactly with the number of seats in here. So if everybody registered, it should be, and everybody comes, then it should be. Everything should be fine. We have a quite packed schedule today, so I'll get right into it. My name is Andreas Jørgensen, and this is Alexander Samagni. Yeah, maybe you should. And we are chairing this workshop session. So yeah. We wrote in the description of the workshop that the objective of this workshop is to outline a research agenda for further developing life cycle sustainability assessment. And the reason why we think that a research agenda is so important here to discuss is first of all that there is a large interest in the development of LCSA, of course, and in this development. At least I find that finding the important, the relevant research question can actually be a very demanding task. It can almost be kind of half the task, at least I find. And in this work on identifying the relevant topics, discussions among colleagues in the field can be extremely helpful. At least I find. So this is kind of the formal reason why we want to do this workshop and why we want to discuss the research agenda. So I hope that when we leave this workshop here at 12 o'clock, hopefully, if everything fits, that every one of us will be a little bit clearer on what we think is the relevant research topics when it comes to development of LCSA. And apart from this very kind of formal reason formal purpose for this workshop, another one is also simply to have a chance to discuss among colleagues in the field something which I guess every one of us is very interested in, the development of LCSA. This is a chance that you don't have so often, I think at least. So this is also, of course, the purpose of the workshop. The program for today is that after this introduction, we'll have a series of presentations, 4 presentations, each lasting 20 minutes, except for the last one from Alessandra. That was going to be a double workshop, but her partner couldn't make it today. But still, she needed a little bit longer time, so she got 35 minutes instead. But the structure is so that there will be 20 minutes presentation and 5 minutes for Q&A, except then for Alessandra. We'll have 30 minutes and 5 minutes for Q&A. Hopefully around 10:30 we'll have a coffee break for 10 minutes, and after that I will introduce the group discussions that we'll have, and I'll come back to the questions that we'll discuss there. And then I should say also that the idea is that we should report back from this workshop to the rest of the symposium. That's going to be, or we have a kind of a slot at the LCSA session Wednesday 10:20. So I just wanted to hear if anybody wanted to. We've got a 50 minutes reporting of the main findings here in this workshop. So if anybody would be interested, I don't know if. Raise your hand if you're interested, or you can also come to me in the break or whatever. But I don't know if there's anybody kind of interested, as it is. No? Well, okay. But if you change your mind, then come and talk to me. And also, we are going to. The plan was at least that we're going to create a kind of workshop report which is going to be published in the International Journal of Life Cycle Assessment. There, I guess we should also, if there's anybody who would like to participate in that work, maybe to take notes and stuff, that would also be quite helpful. Yeah. So again, if there's anybody interested in that, please raise your hand. Yeah, okay, we got one down there. Great. Okay, so but that was the introduction, and we are right on time. So the first presentation is by Walter.
Does it look terrible? Okay. Yeah, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers to arrange this very timely meeting, and I hope that we will have a good discussion. So, I subtitled my presentation a personal account, and so, yeah, okay. So therefore, I start with how my involvement came about, and then I will show a few slides about the origin of the term sustainability, which is, I think, not generally known. The most important part will be, applications for product systems. And I have to say, I'm only speaking about product system, or the micro level according to Calcas, yeah, it's a three-tier scheme. The lowest one, products, nothing else. And this is a status of life cycle method development, and finally, I will show you 4 possible ways to standardize this life cycle sustainability assessment in accordance with ISO. Okay, let's start. My first encounter with sustainability assessment was a book written in German, a very influential book in '87. It proposed a kind of a proto-LCA, you know, these early LCAs before SETAC and ISO came in, with 3, that was the important point, with 3, excuse me. That's, that was it, yeah. So, where, it's here? Aha. 3 kinds of impact assessments, yeah? Environmental, so the ordinary LCA, economic and social. This one quite quantitative already at that time. Economic also, of course, it's money, and the social part more qualitative. So roughly the same it is still today. Yeah. So the next big experience was a great project and coordinated by TU Berlin, by Professor Fleischer, and with cooperation with several research institutes in Germany, and I also was one of these associated. And we had coordinators, it was Wolf-Peter Schmidt, Gerald Rewitzer, Kerstin Lichtenfort, and we continued after that, it was a very long project, after that we continued to cooperate in some way, yeah, you know, in working groups, SETAC and so on. So the next point was, yeah, no, that was not the next one. Doch. the first lifecycle management conference in Copenhagen, 2001, which was organized by Alan Astrup. And that was a great success, this conference. But I found out that there was some very sloppy use of the system boundaries, inconsistent system boundaries between the three components. They said, in industries they call it triple bottom line. Yeah? And I found there's something wrong with it. Yeah? Some alarm bell went on. Yeah? That's, since all this remembering of the old LCAs in the early times, this swindling and cheating with different system boundaries also came up to mind, and I thought it could be here the same. Yeah. So the next chance was a presentation in Athens, an invitation to Greece, and I published then this paper together with Gerald Rewitzer as an editorial in the journal, editorial for the lifecycle management section, the new section at that time. I discussed it with Gerald Rewitzer and others, and so my main request was, and still is, consistent, ideally identical system boundaries of the three components. So, next LCM conference in Zurich. Also, I gave a presentation and published this as a peer-reviewed paper in my journal. This is quite often cited recently. And so between we had the problem of naming the child, yeah, how to call it. And we ended up with lifecycle sustainability assessment with a known acronym. It was proposed by Isa Reiner, my long-time co-worker at Patel, and by Matthias Finkbeiner, and I gladly removed my ugly abbreviation SUST as I used formerly. That's not only bad English, it has connotations which are okay. So in between we had the input to, it was last year, the input to UNEP SETAC guidance and last year, and so finally we have now Alessandro Samagni, subject editor, and as very recently appointment, associate subject editor Macia Traversa. Okay, let's go on. In parallel to these activities, we had working groups going on lifecycle costing. Yeah? That was nearly 10 years we worked within SETAC Europe on a working group on environmental lifecycle costing. We had this book by Hankela et al. It was presented at the World Conference in Sydney, 2007. And finally, last year we had this code of practice, which was more or less condensed, content of the book condensed into a kind of code of practice for SETAC. It's also published now. So that's the status, and I think we can now continue somewhat back to history, where the term sustainability comes from. Yeah? And it evidently comes out of the silviculture, yeah, the forestry, and here's the name of Hans Karl von Karlowitz, is very important one. This was his first book, a very famous book. I'll show it later. And now, very recently, Ulrich Grover, he's a cultural philosopher, a cultural scientist, and he just went back the name, where does the name sustainability come from and how it developed. So, and it's quite interesting. It's in German, unfortunately. But he showed, for example, that from the German nachhaltig, we call it Nachhaltigkeit sustainability, it went to French, soutenu, via some forest research institutes in Namur, I think, yeah. And from there, from soutenu to sustainable in English. And he followed this up, the further development, up to the Brundtland report. And then, of course, international career, what this word has, was Rio de Janeiro, the UNEP conference, first UNEP conference, the second one in Johannesburg, where the life cycle thinking came, was joined to the sustainable development concept, and that was great. So I think the last Rio Plus 20 was not so famous. Did not care so much about it. So yeah, okay, that's his book, and yeah, it's in an antiquarian bookshop. You get it for €2,000, but there's a reprint and more recent one. But it's not easy reading, even for German-speaking people. It's a Baroque German and printed in Gothic letters. So, but if you take the care and go through the relevant sections, you find out that it's really not only about economic problems, but also about environmental, as we would say today, and even some social aspects. Yeah, there's Hans Karl von Karlowitz. He was a superintendent or a director of the Saxonian silver mines at that time. Yeah, and so he had to use a lot of timber for the operation of the silver mines. Yeah? But he was also a hobby forest scientist starting from his youth, from a visit in France. France was a leading country, in forest country at that time. And he pursued this lifelong and tried to combine his praxis and the theory of forest and so on. It was very influential anyway. So, Brundtland report, of course, it was a culminating point of the sustainability development, and everybody knows, of course, this famous formulation here. But on the other hand, we have to admit there's no hint to a possible operationalization of this term, and therefore if we try to do it in a quantitative way, we have, of course, to think about how to operationalize it, and so at least for product system, and maybe there was something for really developing countries and so, but for product systems it's not useful. And yeah, I think I mentioned that already. So that's next United Rio de Janeiro. This was the first one, and one in Johannesburg. That was, I think, for life cycle assessment. This was the most important. And yeah, okay, Rio Plus 20. Okay, now application to product system. I mentioned already this book, Produktlinien-Analyse, Product Line Analysis. Yeah, it's not a good translation, perhaps. But they had already the 3 pillars. That's important. And one funny thing, that was the same year when the Brundtland report came out. Yeah, so I first thought, I first thought that this. The 3 pillars of the Produktlinien-Analyse is a kind of interpretation of the Brundtland report. But it cannot be. It was the same year, so it's absolutely impossible. And I recently had a mail exchange with one of the leading guys of this group, and he told me, it was Frieder Rubik, by the way, yeah, he wrote a book of SEA also. He told me that they had in this working group invented the 3 pillars. Okay, so it's maybe double inventions, but he said so. Okay, that was that. Yeah, there are other names, of course, for it, triple bottom line in industry, the PPP and such. Yeah. And there's, I think, no doubt that for operationalization we need life cycle based method. Yeah, that's, I think, not needed to discuss. So that was view of our artist, designer. It's a bit trashy, I think. But you know, these Greek columns in the air, so it's floating in the air, that was visionary at that time. Okay, it's not a good example for sustainability. Yeah. So the most simple way now to combine the three pillars is my use this one, and I published it, of course. So that we have life cycle assessment plus life cycle environmental life cycle assessment. We have to say environmental life cycle costing plus social LCA, and the plus signs are of course only symbolic. So I really do not recommend to add up any results of the three columns to a common result, since in such cases you always need factors of some for weighting factors and so. And if we use weighting factors, we come into this valuation discussion of the 90s, and that's really was an ugly discussion. So I would say three separate assessments are better. So, but there are some prerequisites, very few ones. My main prerequisite is that we have consistent system boundaries for the three life cycle methods using the physical life cycle, so cradle to grave, as we have it in LCA, and not the marketing life cycle, and compatible inventories, of course, for the three. We will have difficulties with social life cycle assessment, since in most cases requires a better regional resolution, as we need it in LCA and in LCC. So now the status of the development. First of all, the highest status has, of course, the environmental LCC. We have the ISO standards 14040 and 14044, last actualization of 2006. That's from the standpoint of standardization, of course, the highest status, and especially 14040 is so-called the mother of several other standards which refer to 14040. And environmental LCC, we have now a code of practice, which was published last year by SETAC Press. In social LCA, there's a UNEP SETAC guideline from 2008. And finally, for life cycle sustainability assessment, we have a kind of first framework, which was published last year also by UNEP SETAC. So that's roughly the status of development. And okay, was it at all? Yeah. Okay. So we come now to the question, how can we standardize the whole life cycle sustainability assessment? And I promised you at least 4 possibilities. And of course, one question for us is which one should pursue. Now, option 1, this is my preferred option, as you may know, and three life cycle results or methods and results. Excuse me. So, option 1. The 3, yeah, with the same, of course, the same compatible system boundaries and the same functional unit, of course. And weighting and aggregation, as I already told, weighting and aggregation should be discouraged. Option 2, that would mean that life cycle sustainability is equal to life cycle assessment new. That would require that in a future revision, LCC and social LCA would have to be added as impact categories to a common LCI, so that the new LCA would be a giant life cycle sustainability assessment. But of course, this option would extend the present standard considerably, yeah. And 14/44 is already quite voluminous, and frankly speaking, I do not think that this possibility has a chance. Option 3 is that we combine LCA and LCC into something called eco-efficiency and plus social LCA. This has partly been done. We have now a ISO standard 14045. I think this year it was it's a final version, and this eco-efficiency is defined in a funny way, yeah, as LCA, our traditional LCA, plus value. So what means value? And I explain, yeah, value can optionally be a price or LCC result in euro, dollar, whatever, or have other content. So what that means is not clear to me, but yeah. It's a fact you can interpret 14/45 as something which is compatible with LCC. You're running a little bit less. Yeah, that's already the fourth option, to combine LCA with a socio-economic analysis. There are a few examples for this one. IFA has proposed it. And there's one text from the Austrian Ministry of the Environment. And of course, in this combination, the economic component is more or less within this one. So, and I think the authors would like to have it. So that's my final slide, and it's just a look into 14/40, what they say to this problem. They say LCA addresses the environmental aspect and potential impacts, blah, 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 and LCA typically does not address economic or social aspects of a product, but the life cycle approach and so on may be applied to these other aspects. So in 14/40 is already foreseen that the methodology is used also for this other two-pillar, so to speak, and that was my presentation. Thanks for listening.
I guess we have time for one question, if there's any.
Somebody else? Thanks, Walter, for your presentation. I much appreciate it. Just one question about your second proposal for possible standardization as for LCSA. When you mention LCSA as LCA new, so one modeling step in which we account for all the different pillars, do you still refer to an LCSA applied to a product level, or also to other levels like we mentioned in Calcas, for example, so some meso and macro one?
Yeah, I think that would be only micro sense. In my interpretation, the ordinary 14/40 is also micro level, not? Mostly, yeah. It's industry, industry companies or so are not so directly addressed, no? Yeah, I would say it would be the same as 14/40, not? And, and it's a linear system. If in your macro system that cannot be linear, yeah, that's quite clear. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for this, Walter. The next presentation is by me, and I need the microphone, Walter. Walter.
Habe es mitgenommen, oder wie?
seems that we've run out of chairs. So we're just going to get a few more and then. Okay. My presentation is called, I've already introduced myself, so I won't do that again. My presentation is called Sketching and Impact Assessment Method for LCSA. I've heard once that you only got the full attention of your audience for the first 5 minutes of your presentation. So whatever take-home message you've got, you should present that here. And so here goes. What I would like to argue in this presentation is that if sustainability is defined as according to the Brundtland definition, we've already seen that, then rather than being seen as a sum of the LCA, the LCC, and the social LCA, LCSA can more accurately be seen as a combination of a modified LCA and a modified social LCA. So this is what I would like to argue, and let me show you in the following slides how I reach this conclusion. First of all, I understand LCSA as being a lifecycle-oriented assessment methodology which can be used to assess the extent to which a product, service, or system promotes or hinders sustainability. And I've highlighted this last part of the sentence because this is really what I think is central. This is what we would like, in my understanding, to assess in LCSA, the extent to which a product promotes or hinders sustainability. And if this is what we want to assess, then of course we need to know what do we mean by sustainability. And I've taken a point of departure in this Brundtland definition, as I said before. The reason for doing so is first of all that if you look into the literature on LCSA, all the articles that actually mention a definition refer to this one, at least that I have seen. So therefore, I think it's kind of relevant to use this as a basis for the analysis. Of course, it doesn't mean that this is the right definition or anything. It's just kind of, I've chosen this as being a relevant definition to work with as a starting point. But as Walter also said in his presentation, we need to kind of operationalize this. We need to make it kind of more workable in an LCSA context. It's not obvious how we're going to relate this to a product system. So we need to make a couple of interpretations, and I'll present two of them here, two kind of important ones, I think. The first one relates to the second sentence in the definition here. The question of how can we ensure that future generations will have the ability to meet their own needs. And my interpretation of this is that what we actually want to ensure here is that future generations will have the same possibilities as we have had for meeting our needs. So some level of intergenerational equity. This is also relatively standard interpretation. If this is the case, if this is the interpretation, then it makes sense here to introduce the concept of capital. And the capital can be understood as anything that generates a flow of services which enhances the welfare of humans. So basically, if what we want to do is, if we want to ensure that future generations have the same possibility for meeting their needs as we have had, what we need to do is, according to this understanding of capital, we need to maintain the same level of capital, basically. So this is the first important interpretation that I would like to make here, which is going to make this definition more kind of workable in an LCSA context. The second important interpretation relates to the question of how do we meet the needs of the present, or what do we understand by it also in general. And here, I think here it's quite relevant here to also look at other parts of the Brundtland report, and most notably maybe the sentence coming right after the definition here, which states that overriding priority should be given to the essential needs of the world's poor. And to keep things simple, I've said that well, when we are talking about meeting the needs of the present, what we're talking about is meeting the essential needs of the world's poor. So only the essential needs of the world's poor. So this is obviously a simplification here, but this is and then the question, of course, is how do we meet the essential needs of the world's poor? And my interpretation is then this relates to the question of alleviating poverty. So these are kind of the two important interpretations that I've made here of the definition here, meaning that this definition here, the Brundtland definition here, can be understood in terms of these two goals. And in LCA terms, we could say that this could then be seen as the area of protection in LCA, AOP in LCA. In LCSA. Sorry. Yeah. I guess no more chairs. No. No. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sorry about that. And of course the next question then that we have to address is, well, how do product life cycles affect this AOP in LCSA? And I'll start by the first question: how do product life cycles affect poverty? That was the first kind of goal here, the first part of the AOP. And unfortunately, there isn't, to my knowledge, any literature addressing the explicit link between product life cycles and poverty alleviation. So some kind of interpretation or some kind of workaround is needed here. And maybe one solution is to say that if we acknowledge that a large part of product life cycles take place in companies, and if we then say that it is, or if we assume that the way that the products affect poverty is through the conduct of companies, then we can actually utilize some literature from the CSR area, where they have addressed how companies affect poverty. And this list here is as a summary made by Kulk and Tolker, where they summarize what has been presented in CSR literature. And what they come up with is that what companies should try to do in order to alleviate poverty is to be in compliance with ILO conventions, ensure fair wages and benefits. They should ensure that their activities are in harmony with development priorities of the country in which they're located and within national laws and regulation. They should ensure training of employees and finally monitoring of the company's activities for poverty alleviation. And what is quite striking about this list is that this is actually very close to what has been proposed to being assessed in social LCA. So it means that if we accept this list as being a valid representation of what companies can do to alleviate poverty, then social LCA can actually be used as a tool for assessing that. But of course, it should be noted here that this list has been severely criticized by people in the development research, claiming that it's too simplistic, and I won't go into the details here. But so it probably means that it's going to be when more research is done on this area, it's probably going to be adjusted a little bit, but some, whatever. But at least for now, we can say that this fits quite well with existing social LCA. And also it should of course also be said, by taking this approach, I of course do not include potential impacts of the use stage of the product on poverty alleviation, should there be any, because this only relates to how companies influence poverty. So that part of the life cycle is of course not included here. That's an important limitation here. Yeah, so that was the first question then, how companies or how product life cycles affect poverty. The next part of the question was then how product life cycles affect the stock of capital. Here, of course, it's relevant to look into what kind of capitals exist, or what is it that we're interested in. And Berger Schmidt and Noll came up with this list in 2000, stating that there is first of all natural capital, which relates to the services provided by nature. Then there is human capital, which relates to the production capacities of workers based on their skills, their education level, their health, also very important. And then there is produced capital, which relates to infrastructure, basically. And then there is social capital that relates to social networks that facilitate cooperation. So the question is then how product life cycles affect these different types of capital. And when it comes to natural capital, then we can say that this is actually something that has extensively been addressed in LCA. But it should be noted that the concept of natural capital is actually somewhat broader than what is currently assessed in LCA. So there might need to, if we want to assess the entire concept, how product life cycles affect the entire concept of natural capital, then we probably need to expand the LCA a little bit. Then there is human capital, and here again, you could say that this is also something which has been addressed both in LCA and in social LCA. LCA in terms of how a product or how flows in processes affect human health, and in social LCA how work affects the worker primarily in terms of health, but also in terms of education level or in terms of skills. Yeah, and but when it comes to produced capital, the picture is a little bit different because we could say that there has been some initiatives for including impact categories relating to produced capital in social LCA, but and some have also claimed that this kind of belongs to social LCA, but according to my knowledge, this hasn't been addressed so much. So probably some modifications to social LCA needs to be made if produced capital should be included here. And when it comes to social capital, the situation is even worse, because here you could say our level of understanding of what creates and destroys social capital is not at the state so that we can say that certain events in the product life cycle will have this and that effect on social capital. So here you could say, well, establishing this link might not be feasible currently. But anyway, you could say that when it comes to how product life cycles affect these types of capital, then we can say to a large extent, or to a reasonably large extent, this can be covered by an LCA and social LCA. And this then leads to the conclusion, which I also presented before. And so just to summarize what I've been saying, then I've said that first of all, that LCSA is a tool. That was my understanding of it, as a tool to assess how products promote or hinder sustainability. And if this is the case, and if we understand sustainability as according to the Brundtland definition, and if we make the interpretations that I've done, then what we need to assess is how products affect poverty, first of all, and then also the stock of capital. And this can be done through an LCA, at least a social LCA, assessing how product life cycles impact poverty, at least if we accept the research from the CSR literature. And when it comes to the stock of capital, this can be assessed through an expanded LCA and a modified social LCA. So thereby coming to the conclusion that I presented on the first or second slide, that LCSA can be seen as a combination of a modified LCA and social LCA. Or if I should maybe say it in a little bit more detail, you could say that that it can be seen as a combination of a social LCA relating to poverty alleviation, an LCA relating to impacts on natural and human capital, and then a social LCA relating to human, social, and produced capital to the extent possible. That was actually that was kind of my the conclusions on this presentation here, and then I'll go on and propose some relevant what I see as relevant research topics for the development of LCSA, and for that and as you could see on the previous slides, there are a lot of kind of uncertainties in this framework that I've built up here. So I think there is a lot of things that really needs to be looked into, or what would be relevant to look into, and to categorize different research topics or research questions in terms of their relevance. I've made this table here, where there is kind of 2 dimensions, as you can see here. One top dimension here, horizontal dimension relating to how a research topic is relevant for the development of LCSA, and then a vertical dimension here relating to whether research is already ongoing or whether there is no research ongoing. So the idea here is that if a research topic is relevant for LCA or social LCA, and if there is already ongoing research, then it might not be as relevant to look into right now as a research topic which is only relevant for LCSA and where there is no research going on at the moment. Simply because if, for example, we take an LCA topic, then there will be much more people simply that will be interested in looking into this topic, and if it's only relevant for LCSA, then it's probably only going to be us sitting here in this room and a handful of other people that will be interested in looking into it. So this says maybe something about the kind of I don't know, urgency now, but that's maybe not the right word. But anyway, kind of the relevance of research topics. And just an example here is for example, if you say, well, improvement of use tox method for assessing toxicity and LCA might be relevant, of course, because it relates to LCA and therefore also LCSA, but it's probably not kind of the most urgent research topic when it comes to development of LCSA. What I think, therefore, is more relevant to look into is, or the most relevant question that I think is right now is to establish a valid link between the definition of sustainability, a definition that could be not only the one that I presented here, but it could be any, and the LC life cycle tools. Of course, I've made a suggestion here, and probably that also need refinement and stuff, but that was at least one. That was all for me. Thank you for your attention. We got time for
several questions, I guess. Andreas?
Thank you very much, Andreas. One question: how do you define poverty? It's a refreshing, I would say, definition of your areas of protection. I think the capital was very broad, and I'm not sure how you define the poverty in that context.
No, actually, you could say I've been very pragmatic about that. You could say the definition, so to speak, of poverty here is given by the topics that the CSR literature has stated as being relevant to look into.
Because
so I haven't. I mean, of course, it would be relevant to go into that discussion and to try to make a kind of more clear. I don't know what to call it. In LCA terms, we could call it maybe an impact pathway between different areas relating to poverty and product life cycles. But here I've simply just said, okay, this is what they state in CSR literature that is relevant when it comes to poverty. Okay.
But poverty in the sense that people do not have enough food for eat and to buy food for eat and so on.
I think
in a very narrow sense.
No, and this is now you actually come into one of the things that this CSR list have been criticized for because one of the things that one of the critics is that this. The CSR research community does not really go into what poverty is. They just say, okay, this is really what we should. This is how we affect. And for people from development research, they say that you need to have some kind of underlying understanding of what is poverty in order to establish some kind of strategy of how to alleviate it. And here you could say that is probably not really well looked into.
Because I could, sorry to ask a follow-up question, I could also imagine that you say there's capital, which is social capital, natural capital, and so on, and then you have something like availability of capital to people, and that is then, if there's a shortage, then you have poverty. That's not only that they don't have enough food and so on, because that's really very narrow, and then you can say China is very sustainable because everybody, the economic success is great, there's no freedom really and so on, but that's not covered by poverty, of course, but it's a way of shortage of capital, which would then really cover the both aspects. So that's maybe an
that might
extension.
be that might be good suggestion at least to look into. Yeah, thanks. Do we have time for one more question? Yes. Oh, but it's for the filming actually.
Yeah. So according to your LCSA point of view, so are you suggesting that we shouldn't go into detail into economical calculations, like for instance to have an entire life cycle cost assessment? Or
yeah, I would say that at least the conclusion here points to that. I think that of course it's often stated, and I'm not kind of trying to argue against that there are three dimensions of sustainability, but just because we mention economic pillar of sustainability doesn't necessarily mean that it is the cost of somebody that we are referring to. It could be, for example, if you relate to if you look into the interpretation that is made in the Agenda 21, the way that the economic dimension is defined there or is interpreted relates to macroeconomic settings. So that is something that is very different than costs to some specific macroeconomic settings that is relevant for poverty alleviation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There will be time for last one very short question, if any. Yeah, very short.
Hi. Since LCC was missing their kind of an antithesis, there would be that you could fit all of the sustainability in LCC, because first you had the poverty reduction. You could reduce that to value added to people who live in absolute poverty, and then capital was defined as something which produces a flow of value to people. You could also then reduce that to value added. So. Just kind of a comment that if you have a thesis, then this would be the antithesis of that you could reduce all of it into LCC.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure actually how externalities is considered in LCC, but normally I think it's not really included, right? I think externalities. I mean, that's it's really the kind of economical cost to somebody. So I guess that part would not be included. But of course, when it comes to poverty alleviation, and if you consider poverty again in purely kind of economical terms, then I guess it would be possible to say, okay, we are having an LCC that is directed only to kind of to assess changes in income level on the people that are very poor. Then I guess yeah, that might be an indicator that you could use as an indicator of poverty alleviation. I guess I just yeah I don't know, but yeah. But at least that would be a very specific LCC then.
Okay, I think we can just stop the discussion and move on to the next presenter. And we will heard about the Prospective approach and perspective, in particular related to sustainability assessment of new technologies.
Yeah, so my name is my name is Lex Roes. I'm a postdoc researcher at Utrecht University in the Netherlands. I'm involved in a project called the ProSuit project. This is work in progress, and I will present you the current status of this project, which is also about sustainability assessment of technologies. So what I will tell you today, first introduction to ProSuit, then the problem that we have with current approaches for sustainability assessment. Then I will outline the proposed new approach within ProSuit. Then I will present you some conclusions. And then maybe some topics for discussion, the main challenges for lifecycle sustainability assessment based on our experience here. So the ProSuit project, well, the idea behind it is continuously new technologies are developing. And society requires that sustainability issues are accounted for in the development of technologies. And as such, the impact on sustainability should actually be measured. So that is the aim of the project, the development and the application of a standardized methodology for the prospective sustainability assessment of technologies. As you can see, it's prospective, so there's a main focus on new technologies. The project started in 2009 and it will end in 2013, so we have 1 more year to go. And it follows a life cycle approach. It covers social, economic and environmental impacts. And in the end, we want to develop a software tool that everybody can use to quantify and to assess the contribution of a technology to sustainability. Well, here you can see different work packages in the ProSuit project. You see that I'm from Utrecht University. We are responsible for the coordination together with the University of Nijmegen in the Netherlands. You see that there's a work package for the economic assessment, there's a work package for the environmental assessment, a work package for the social assessment, and also a work package for the integration of these 3 domains. Then we have some case studies. Case studies are actually concrete cases that we use to test the methodologies that are being developed in ProSuit, so that we can give feedback to the methodology developers. Then there's a work package on software development for the tool that we want to develop in the end, and also we want to disseminate the products of ProSuit. So there's a work package for dissemination, and as you can see, it's a European project, and there are many European institutes involved, amongst other also the Technical University of Denmark. The problem with the current approaches for sustainability assessment is that they are often too specific for certain products. For example, only for bio-based products or only for food products, and we want to have a methodology that is applicable to all technologies or all products. So it should be applicable. So it should be. It's not the conventional methodologies are not applicable to a wide range of technologies. And also, there is no clear aggregation of the various impacts. Sometimes they include social and economic and environmental impacts, but then it's very, very ad hoc how they are aggregated into a score, or if they are aggregated at all. So there's a need for a sustainability assessment method that covers all dimensions of sustainability in a comprehensive way, that is applicable to a wide range of technologies, and that pursues a rigorous assessment along the cause-effect chain to ultimate scores. Well, I'm sorry, I have to sit down. I'm a bit dizzy. This is in environmental LCA. We have a cause-effect chain that starts with elementary flows, such as emissions to soil, water, or environment, or air. And they are aggregated into midpoint indicators, as you can see here, and then these midpoint indicators can be further aggregated into endpoint indicators. And this idea to go from interventions into the environment to midpoints to endpoints is what we want to use in ProSuite as well. So originally we had this approach. We start with the interventions, then to midpoints, and then into three environmental endpoints, which is the social domain, the environmental domain, and the economic domain, and they are then aggregated into one sustainability score. There are some problems with this original approach. There are overlaps. For example, social impact, for example, the quality of life could include health, which is environmental, but also income, which is then economic. We could, in order to aggregate everything into one single score, we could use an external cost approach in which you convert everything to economic impacts, and then everything would become economic. And also, for example, health impacts from environmental interventions are considered part of the environmental pillar, but occupational impacts, occupational health are then part of the social pillar. So you see that there are several overlaps, and as such, the original approach was not considered suitable. So therefore, we propose a new approach that is to include 5 endpoints instead of 3. So not only social, not as such social, economic, environmental, but one endpoint for the impact on human health, one impact on social well-being, one impact on prosperity, and prosperity is then the term for the economic domain. One impact on the natural environment, and one impact on exhaustible resources. And if you see these 5 endpoints, then the first 3 mostly concern the present generation, while the last 2 are mostly future generations. I will now present to you because our aim in ProSuite is to quantify these impacts for these 5 endpoints, so that we can, in the end, have a quantitative assessment of new technology, of sustainability assessment of new technologies. So I will first present to you the impact on human health. This is quantified in the so-called DALYs. DALY is disability adjusted life year. So this is a metric for every year that you live with a disability, or even that you lose life years due to death. It consists of several midpoints. The first is impact on consumption-related human health. These are impacts that arise from the use of a product, for example, due to toxic exposures during use. Then there is impact on occupational health, and this is what happens at work. You see, it's based on accidents and diseases at work. And then there is environmental human health, and this arises from midpoints that we know from the environmental assessments, and they are based on the elementary flows, that is the emissions into the air and the soil and water. Social well-being. We are inspired by a paper from Bo Weidema. Bo Weidema defines several midpoints for the impact on social health and uses a metric of QALYs, and QALY is similar to DALYs, but it means quality adjusted life years. So that is every year you live with less quality of life, so to say. We defined several midpoints: impact on autonomy, impact on safety, security and tranquility, impact on equal opportunities, and impact on participation and influence. In the next slide, I will give you a short definition of each of these midpoints. And they are calculated from indicators from the so-called Delphi rounds. Delphis are consultation rounds with experts who defined a set of indicators that they consider particularly relevant for the social assessment. Well, the definitions, as I said, autonomy means being in control of oneself and one's resources. Safety, security, and tranquility. Safety means freedom from threats to personal health. Security means freedom from threats to personal property. Tranquility means freedom from excessive stress. Equal opportunity is defined as a stipulation that all people should be treated similarly, unhampered by artificial barriers or prejudices or preferences, except when particular distinctions can be explicitly justified. And participation and influence is the act of taking part or sharing in something and affecting the course of event. So these are as you can see, these are the definition of the social midpoints that we want to take into account. Then the impact on prosperity, which is the economic dimension. We propose to measure it as the change in GDP, gross domestic product. It's calculated from the impact on labor productivity, capital productivity, resource productivity, and the impact on new market development. The first three midpoints are calculated from capital expenditures, operational expenditures, and end-of-life expenditures. These are basically the inventory data that we also use for life cycle costing, for example, for microeconomic assessment. But we also want to include the impact on new market development. That is, if you bring a new product to the market, then it creates a new economy. For example, the first television was a whole new product. It creates a new economy, and as such, it creates a new market and has also influence on the GDP. The next endpoint is the natural environment. We want to focus on the impact it has on biodiversity, which is represented by the potentially disappeared fraction of species. So the amount of the species that disappear from an ecosystem. So its impact on ecosystem health. It's calculated from the following midpoints, the environmental midpoints that people who work with environmental assessment are familiar with. And these are calculated from the inventory data, like the emissions to air, water, and soil. And then finally, there's the impact on exhaustible resources. The unit for this endpoint still has to be determined. It consists of two midpoints. Impact on fossil resource depletion and impact on mineral resource depletion. And fossil resource depletion is often measured as kilograms of oil equivalents, for example, while mineral resource depletion it could be determined by, for example, antimony equivalents or iron equivalents. They could all be converted into money. That is the costs of increased mining if fossil resources or mineral resources get scarce, and then as such the unit of this endpoint could be money, could be euros, for example. And they are calculated from the elementary flows, that is extractions from the earth crust. Well, with these endpoints that I just presented, we arrive at an overall framework that you can see here. Here are the 5 endpoints that I presented, with the midpoints that are separately determined to calculate these endpoints, and then these endpoints can be interpreted into a sustainability assessment. Well, the interpretation of these 5 endpoints into one sustainability assessment, that's also a topic of discussion at this moment. Well, let me first present this slide to conclude a bit. The overall sustainability assessment is, an assessment across all impact categories is needed. And as I said, we have to interpret the scores on the 5 endpoints, and for that there are various approaches available. We could leave the endpoints as they are, so without aggregating. I recently presented this framework at the European Commission, and this is actually their preference. They want no aggregation, because as soon as you start aggregating, you also lose a certain level of detail. And by not aggregating, you keep all the detail in your various midpoint and endpoints visible. Well, another approach is a multi-criteria analysis that is basically relating to hierarchy. You try to define a preferred option, or you aggregate with weighting. And the last option is an aggregation into one single score, for example, to get one value for the sustainability assessment. And then we could get the situation in which you said alternative A has a score of 15 on sustainability, and alternative B has a score of 30 on sustainability. So then, if you want a lower score, then alternative A would be preferable. But as I said, when presenting this to the European Commission, they advised us not to aggregate. But this is at this moment, this is part of the discussion within ProSuit. So to conclude, we propose a framework that covers all dimensions of sustainability. For all impact categories, an assessment is possible on a life cycle basis and across the full cause-effect chain. And what we strive for is an impact, a definition of impact categories that follow principle by the company McKinsey. That's the MECE principle. It should be mutually exclusive, which means there is no overlap between the indicators, and they should be collectively exhaustive, which means they cover all aspects of sustainability. Well, maybe some topics for discussion. We think that what requires especially attention is the development of indicators for the social assessment. We want to define a quantitative metric for these indicators. It's very hard to quantify your social impacts, and so we need to determine a methodology on how to aggregate them into one value for the endpoint indicator, social well-being. Another challenge, as I said in the last slide, is how to integrate or interpret the endpoint indicators across the environmental, economic, and social domain. As I said, should we aggregate them into one value? Should we apply a multi-criteria analysis? Maybe some other options that we could apply. So this was my presentation. If you have questions, please ask.
I would like to ask you, what is the difference between the solution of using multi-criteria analysis or obtaining only one representative value of the technology? Because the MCDA allows you to obtain a single value if you want.
That's true. There are many multi-criteria analysis methods available. And some indeed aggregate them into one value with applying some weighting, and others do a ranking approach, which gives you a preferred option. So in a way, to aggregate them into one value could be part of the multi-criteria analysis, but not necessarily, because multi-criteria analysis can also give you a ranking of the five alternative endpoints.
So there is a difference when you say we can obtain only one indicative value of the technology. If you say that multi-criteria is another option.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe that's too quick. Then I mean, in the definition of multi-criteria analysis as a hierarchy approach, I mainly refer to it as ranking the endpoints to say, for example, we prefer that the impact of this technology should have the lowest impact on social well-being, and that is more important than, for example, the environmental part.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
Well, just a short question. You said that the approach adopted is based on life cycle methods, but as far as I understood, it's not the framework Walter just described this morning. It's just not a way in which you couple LCA with LCC, environmental LCC with social LCA. So I'm wondering whether you have developed a framework within ProSuite in which all your development can fit, or you just started from the LCSA as described this morning and developed the single methods in order to account for your different problems.
Well, if I understand your question correctly, we more or less built on existing methodologies. So, of course, there are already proposals for how to measure social impacts and also economic impacts, but we want to go a bit further. because, for example, for the social assessment, we really want to quantify it and define a metric on to give a score for the social impact, and that is as such does not completely exist, although a lot of proposals have been done. So this ProSuit methodology builds on existing approaches but wants to go a bit further and gives quantitative scores for each of these environmental, economic and social domains, and then get to a quantitative score in the end.
It's an interesting presentation. My question goes, is this software having any ability to customize to the developing countries to assess their sustainability on their products? Why I'm raising this question, most of the time now the supply comes from developing nations, like in Asian context. If you can't apply the tools for that context, it may also again hit on the sustainability indexes in developed nations as well.
Yeah. That's a good question. You want to answer? Sorry, I was.
I answer to this because I'm leading the software development work package in that project, and indeed we also here we built on an existing software, OpenSCA, which is an open source software that is available for free and also can be extended by anyone. And of course our duty is to make also the additions by ProSuit fully freely available and also in a modular way, so that you can select whether you want to have this approach or this module or not this module, and can maybe also refine and develop other modules if you like. So this is really made also to be used in developing countries and adapted to different contexts after the end of this project.
If I ask specifically, is ProSuit having the indicators fits to the developing countries, or the factors, or we have to customize it by the...
Well, that's a good question. At the moment, ProSuit has primarily a European scope. Yeah, and I know there is a macroeconomic model which has results for also developing countries. But for example, the environmental characterization factors as such at this moment are primarily European. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks for your presentation. I think it's a very neat framework you have developed. The ultimate test, of course, is always how it works in practice. So I was curious to hear about the case studies you mentioned you were going to do.
Yeah.
What's the level of analysis, the subject, and so on?
Yeah. So maybe it would have been nice if I had included a slide on the case studies. We have 4 technologies involved in the case studies. That is biorefineries, nanotechnology, ICT, and carbon capture and storage. Personally, I'm involved in the nanotechnology case study. It's on a nanocomposite. It's you use a nano object, which is POS. It's a very long, difficult name, so I just say POS. It's an abbreviation. It's mixed with nylon to form a nanocomposite, and that is then used for sausage casing. And I'm comparing that to conventional casing, which is cellulose casing. And as such, I have a concrete case to test methodologies. For example, an economic tool has been developed within ProSuit. So when gathering operational data for these sausage casing, I could apply this economic tool, and then I think, hey, this is good about the tool. This could be improved. So I report that back to the people who work with it. And as such, the purpose of these case studies is within ProSuit to really give feedback to the methodology developers, because if they develop something, they want to hear indeed from the field, from somebody working with concrete cases. Okay, what could be improved? How you really test the methodology. So, but the ultimate goal is also to assess these novel technologies and make a publication out of the assessments that we do. So it's partly for giving feedback to the methodology developers, partly to assess novel cases and make publication out of that.
So it's processes rather than a complete product.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I think time has run out. So, yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then we'll have the last presentation from Alessandra. Oh yeah, you got two. Maybe we should have some air in here. I think it's a little bit. Arne, could you maybe open the door? I'm sorry about the chairs. I'll try to get some in the break. So
Okay. I will try to. I have the task to merge two presentations in one, so I will try to do my best. But please just stop me if I run out of time. And this is the outcome of a work I carried out together with Sernella Sara from JLC, in which we try to understand what are the foundations of life cycle sustainability assessments. And not this one? Okay. Sorry. Okay, so I will just provide a very quick overview, but all the presentation will be available, so you can find much more detail there. I will start a specific point of departure that is the one of sustainability science, in which all the framework of life cycle sustainability assessment will be discussed. And trying to define it, try to define which are the main components of the sustainability science frameworks in terms of ontology, epistemology, and methodology. And then I will quickly present you a conceptual framework for sustainability science. And then in my second part, I will discuss to what extent present life cycle sustainability assessment methods and frameworks are aligned with the principle of sustainability science in which we have framed the overall discussion. When the debate on sustainability science started quite, I would say, a decade ago, more or less, and it was a debate initiated by Cates, which posed several main questions about what a sustainability assessment should assess and in which way. But in literature, we can find really a proper definition of what a sustainability science is. And so we try to define this scientific field as follows. So sustainability science is considered as a solution-oriented discipline that studies complex relationship between nature and humankind, in which both scientific and social paradigms are close together, and in which different scales are covered in terms of space and time. So such an approach implies, such a discipline implies, an holistic approach, so a life cycle approach indeed, in which it's fundamental to integrate the different knowledge from the different sectors, and in order to, it is important to capitalize on the available knowledge, in order to file solutions. That's the main purpose. So from this definition, we can see directly which are the main characteristics of a sustainability science. Is a science which has to deal with complex systems, which cannot be explained by the normal science as we normally apply, because all this complexity are normally not taken into account. And is a science which is about uncertainty, because with such a complex system, we have a lot of parameters and variables, and we don't know exactly how to manage them. And especially because we don't have data enough to take all this complexity into account most of the times. And this is an approach which is about, is a solution-oriented. That means it's about the urgency. We need to tackle the most urgent process, such as those related to climate change. So it's a discipline in which is based, as said in the definition, on an holistic approach. So the life cycle concept is behind. what we have tried to do also is to see to what extent present lifecycle-based methods are considered in such type of framework. And sorry if I run through very quickly, but this just serves the purpose for my second part of the presentation. So just to give you some hints for the reflection. Any science is characterized by its own paradigm, and the paradigm is defined by its own ontology, epistemology, and methodology. So we have tried to, given the definition provided before, and given the amount of papers available literature, we have tried to build up such a conceptual framework for sustainability science. And this is important because every kind of analysis we will perform in terms of sustainability assessments need to be compliant with the rule established in this framework at conceptual and methodological level. So basically, in this framework, we see that sustainability science requires two types of paradigms. The social paradigms, which is the cradle of values and normative positions. And we have the scientific paradigm, which is about facts, the most analytic approach. And sustainability science is a bridge between these two different paradigms. And what we can see is that sustainability science is embedded within society and culture, which include also the political context. And this society and culture inform the social paradigm. Then the scientific paradigm, as any other paradigm, is defined in terms of its ontology, which is about a concept, the set of concepts that define a discipline. Is defined in terms of epistemology, which is the discipline with which we confirm the structure of our scientific theory. And is about the methodology, so which kind of methods and tool can we use within this framework, which need to be coherent with the whole structure we have built up. And for each of these different elements of the our sustainability science, specific requirements apply, and I will show you later on. So, given this very brief framework in which we have sustainability science on one side, characterized by its own paradigm in terms of values on the one side and facts on the other, we try to understand how LCA is perceived within such a framework and which is its role within sustainability science. So we made a meta-review, so a review studies dealing with sustainability assessment methods, and the criteria selected for those review were quite maybe a little bit narrow, but we reviewed all existing sustainability assessment methods. We tried to select those papers in which recommendations for further improvements the assessment were provided. And of course, the keyword of life cycle thinking and life cycle assessments was there. This means that mainly environmental-oriented methods were selected, so social and economic methodologies and tools were not included in this type of analysis. And well, this just to say that we have adopted a specific nomenclature for organizing everything, because in literature there is a lot of confusion sometimes between the different terminology, methods, methodology, frameworks, paradigms, and whatever. So we have adopted a hierarchy according to which we have a framework as the first step, which is the rational, the structure, in which we organize all the knowledge available. Then within the framework we can apply methodologies. So different, like for example, LCA, life cycle costing, and social life cycle assessment that characterize themselves as methodologies. Then we have also, within methodology, we have different methods in term meant as a set of models, tools, and indicators, then enable the calculation of indicators values. And then we have all the others in terms of models, tools, and indicators that are those we normally use within a life cycle assessment study, within a life cycle impact assessment phase. So overall, this meta-analysis, which involved about 50 studies, covering the different aspect of the framework highlighted before, so both ontological, epistemological, methodological aspects. Were useful because we identify key criteria for which were considered relevant for further developing sustainability assessment methodologies. What I would like to mention also already in this step is that even if the life cycle concept is considered at the core of the sustainability science approach, because sustainability science calls for a holistic approach in the analysis. However, LCA and also other related based methods were not considered as a reference method for sustainability assessment. And I will further show you why this is the case. So from the meta review, covering all the studies mentioned before, we selected those criteria that were mentioned also by the authors as relevant for any sustainability assessment methodologies. These criteria are listed here. So they are about the value choice, so the extent to which values are behind the assessment are explicitly mentioned. The other criteria is about the completeness of scope. So being a sustainability assessment, we need to be sure that all dimensions of sustainability are covered. So not just environmental one, but also, of course, the economic and the social one. We need to be sure that the system encompasses a wide analysis, so just not only on the micro level, at the product level, but also on other levels where sustainability problems arise. We need to, completeness of scope is defined also in terms of what we include in the analysis. So the limit of resources and carrying capacity, vulnerability, resilience, indirect effects are all elements that define a proper scope of the analysis. And then, of course, this refers also to the ability of dealing with nonlinearities and dynamic features, because sustainability science recognizes that sustainability assessment is a complex task in which we have a lot of interdependency in size, in which we don't have linear behavior like at the product level, because the more we go up with the levels in the assessment, so the more we shift from the micro to the meso to the macro level, linearity disappears, and we can't use it anymore for providing a representation of our system. So it's important to include these modeling features. The other criteria refer to the scale of the assessment, both in terms of space and time. So we need to handle problems that are related to different geographic scale, and that could be relevant now in the near future or in the long futures. So we need to be able to handle all these different scales. Strategicity referred to the ability of the methods to provide support for strategic decisions. So this means that we need to have methods which provide a clear definition of the decision context. We need to have methods that give us the possibility to assess alternative scenarios versus a status quo assessments, and mostly methods that can support also the scenario development as a technique. And we need, of course, to consider also the consequences that arise after into my system following a specific decision on actions. So this is about considering indirect effect to a large extent. In terms of methodology, this means that the methods we use need to be integrated, not just combined. We can't perform single assessments, quite isolated one from another, but we need to integrate them, accounting for the interdependency and for the different linkages that occur. The methodology should, in principle, assure also should be applicable, first of all, so we need to have data. and the data scarcity is probably one main issue. The methodology needs to be transparent, absolutely, because we need to provide our final user with robust results so we can be critically analyzed. So the methods need to be robust, absolutely. So uncertainty and variability, which are normally dealt with in the assessments, are still much more critical when the analysis is related to such a complex system, because we can't absolutely avoid them. We need to find a way to properly manage the uncertainty. And the last criteria is the one related to the participation of stakeholders. So stakeholders need to be fully integrated within the assessment, because we need to take all the different perspectives into account. So this is something that is not fully applied within LCA. In principle, stakeholders are involved, but usually not in a such high degree. So these main criteria. These main criteria have been used then to evaluate the present LCSA frameworks, so to see whether the framework we have is aligned with this criterion and whether it is able to deal with them. As I said before, the life cycle approach was considered an important approach for sustainability science, for any sustainability assessment, but indeed the life cycle methods and other life cycle based methods were not considered at all as a reference method for sustainability assessment. So this is quite surprising. Maybe we have a very peculiar perspective for saying that, but I think this is something that needs to be further investigated, because it is not clear if the reason was because LCA was not considered appropriate for dealing with such type of problem, or simply because it was neglected. So sorry for this quick overview, but I needed this for the second part. And the second part is more focused on the frameworks we have discussed this morning with the presentation of Walter. So I would like just to give an overview of the relationship between LCA and sustainability on the present frameworks available, so not just the one we saw this morning, and how these current frameworks can be evaluated together with the criteria I showed you before. And then I will provide you just a very short list of what I can consider recommendations for further develop LCSA. We all know that in principle the main features of LCA are fully suitable for a sustainability assessment because because of these two main characteristics: the system thinking, so the holistic approach on the one side, and the interdisciplinary approach. We have the most evident example in the life cycle impact assessment phase, in which we borrow environmental models from other disciplines. But LCA is a framework by definition in which we integrate different type of knowledge, so the interdisciplinary is there. But in practice, this is not recognized, so LCA is not a method recommended for the sustainability assessment in the sustainability assessment literature. Indeed, the question of sustainability, we saw with the presentation of Walter this morning how everything was originated, the discussion. But we have also some example of LCA-based sustainability assessment in the 1998, with some attempts to include sustainability principle within the LCA. There was the natural step approach and the back step approach, but these were not further developed. And the main critique addressed it was that, well, indeed, LCA is not a fully holistic approach. It's a reductionist approach. And that's the reason why LCA can't be suitable for a life cycle sustainability assessment. So, is it true that LCA adopt a reductionist approach? Well, indeed, I would say that is true, because what we do with LCA is just to analyze one single part and the behavior of one single part as representative of the behavior of the whole system. So basically, what we do is that following the behavior of this small part, we are able to tell everything about the behavior of a much complex system. Moreover, in LCA, we have adopted, for practical reason, of course, and thanks to this hypothesis and assumption that we are able to apply the method in the day-by-day life, we have adopted a lot of assumptions. So we have a steady-state type of modeling. We have linear relationship. So this means we adopt a ceteris paribus assumption. Nothing will change. The system is analyzed in isolation. So all the linkages and interrelation are disregarded. And what does it mean in terms of sustainability perspective? This means that we can't describe the emergent phenomena. So emergent phenomena, those phenomena which we can't understand from the analysis of small parts. Because the system at higher level has a completely different behavior that we can't understand from analyzing small components. So we are not able to do this with LCA. And this is probably one reason why LCA is not considered a reference method for sustainability assessment in the literature. So what do we need to move forward and to move towards sustainability? Well, we need for sure a breakthrough, both at conceptual and the modeling level. And but I would say that we are moving in this direction. We have plenty of examples in which the system is has been much more sophisticated in terms of modeling. There starts to be approaches which are able to detect those linkages and mechanisms mentioned before. For example, with the consequential LCA, we are able to incorporate a little bit of economic aspects. So this is a way in which we can incorporate linkages. We have also an interesting approach in which the first one I mentioned is about a paper recently published in which they say that if we want to address sustainability, we have to approach the problem in two different ways, as a top-down modeling, the top-down modeling could be done with the integrated modelings already available, but we need also to combine it with the bottom-up approach. So we need to merge these two different dimensions. And consequential LCA was considered as a way for linkaging the micro perspective with the macro one. We have also a lot of development in terms of including new impact categories. We have a lot of improvements in the environmental mechanism in the environmental models used for the life cycle impact assessment. We have economic and social aspects, so there is a lot of development there. But again, this is not considered to be enough for performing a sustainability assessment according to the definition of sustainability given and complexity given before. So a lot of developments occurs not only in terms of single methods, but also in terms of framework. We have presently two main proposals of LCSA frameworks, where frameworks is meant as a structure which supports evaluation, a structure which is defined by a set of assumptions, concepts, and values. The first framework is the one called Life Cycle Sustainability Assessment, described by Walter this morning, so I will not come back to it. And the second one is the Life Cycle Sustainability Analysis Framework. So we use the term analysis instead of assessment for distinguishing the second part. I will not go into detail why analysis instead of assessment, but just take it as a differentiation for the two frameworks so far. So this is the LCSA analysis framework, which compared to the LCSA assessment frameworks address the problem at different scale. So from the product level to the meso level to the economy-wide level. It addresses all the, let's say, components of sustainability, so environmental, economic, and social one. It merged the inventory and impact assessment step into one modeling phase. And for the rest, it follows more or less the same structure of the present LCA. So its main characteristics are the ability to extend the analysis to higher level, the ability to take into account those mechanisms and linkages I mentioned before, and the ability to incorporate both, let's say, empirical aspects and both normative values. So values are within the framework, are taken into account. And of course, this framework recognizes that for such complex system, we have to deal with uncertainty. So we need to find a way for controlling it. So, given the structure of the two frameworks presented before, we have analyzed to what extent the criteria identified as useful for a sustainability assessment within the framework of sustainability science are presently taken into account in these two frameworks. So there will be a lot of explanation necessary here. So I try to condense everything. But regarding the criteria related to value choices, I used a plus and different plus just to say the extent to which this specific criteria is addressed in both frameworks. And in the papers available, there is a full explanation of all these different criteria. So regarding the value choice, what we can say is that in principle they are already incorporated in the present framework. Both frameworks adopt a strong sustainability perspective. And but the concept of values, what we can say is that they are mentioned. But the concept of values refers also to, let's say, to the value judgment we can have in the weighting step. So even if the weighting step is not recommended, and we saw in the previous presentation of Prospective that there was a clear statement about please don't aggregate, but leave the different results as they are. Weighting is becoming even more required, so because it's functional to the decision maker. So it's something we need to deal with in the next future. Regarding the completeness of scope, what we can say is that all dimensions of sustainability are assessed in both frameworks, so they both cover environmental, economic, and social aspects, but with a different degree, because in the life cycle sustainability analysis framework, all these dimensions are covered also at different levels, so not only the product one. Regarding the ability to deal with the limit of resources and carry capacity, vulnerability, resilience, presently we don't have this capability in both in these two frameworks. And something has been developed at the level of life cycle impact assessment, for example, as regarding the concept of critical load, but especially for the aspect related to vulnerability and resilience, which are something that would be better addressed at the endpoint level. We are still, I would say, quite far from systematization of these effects. I will jump some of these criteria about non-linearity and dynamic features, where it is not properly true. Indeed, there are already approaches in the field of LCA dealing with dynamic features, but again, we are still at the beginning and we need to develop more. The reason why in this framework I put this plus is because in principle, the life cycle sustainability analysis framework is able to deal with non-linearities and dynamic features. So all the main rationale behind this evaluation is that we need to consider that the life cycle sustainability assessment framework is already available and we can apply it according to the conditions defined this morning. The life cycle sustainability analysis framework is a conceptual framework, so it's still not operational, but in principle is able to deal with all these complexities. So I don't have time to go into this detail, but so just for the reason I've explained that the life cycle sustainability analysis is defined only at conceptual level, in principle is able to accommodate all the aspects required for a sustainability assessment. Clearly, the question of applicability, comparability, and the question of scientific robustness will be much more critical, while in the present life cycle sustainability assessment framework, we have in the life cycle assessment community, a lot has been done in terms of data network, databases, and a lot has been done with all the harmonization activity towards comparability and transparency. So just to, sorry for going quickly, but what basis on this analysis in which we compare the two frameworks, in which of course the first one, the life cycle sustainability assessment framework described this morning, is already included in the other framework because it operates at the product level, at the micro level. We started, our point of departure is that sustainability needs to be addressed at different levels, not just the product one. So we need to have methods and able to deal with the different effects we can have at the different scales. So as a further developments, and this is my last slide, what we say is that a life cycle sustainability assessments need to be different from LCA, environmental life cycle costing, and sustainability and social life cycle analysis, because we need to take into account the integration between these three different methods. So we need to move from a reductionist approach, which is typical of each of the single methods, because they analyze just one small part. We need to move towards a more holistic approach. We need to develop a method which we need to be absolutely transparent, because we need to provide the final users and decision makers with good arguments about the assessment carried out. The methods need to be absolutely robust, because otherwise the results we get are meaningful. We need to tailor the assessment for local and specific impacts at the same time. And of course, we need to incorporate stakeholders within the whole process. So far, stakeholders are, I would say, mostly neglected in the assessment. So they are, of course, taken into account in the social life cycle assessment. They represent the backbone of the assessment, but they need to be fully integrated within the full approach of the assessments. Well, so that's I've finished. So this would be the main point that could be put into the discussion also later on. Thanks.
Thank you, Alessandra. We've got time for a couple of questions. Yeah. If not, I've got a question, which is you mentioned that, or you used some time on this idea that we need a more complex, we need to kind of integrate complexity or so into the life cycle tools. But my question would be, is the situation so much different than in, for example, relating to LCA? Because, I mean, in LCA, we are really trying to assess something that is already extremely complex. You could say we are trying to assess how a product affects the entire economy, and then we are trying to say something about how the processes that will be carried out when emissions occurring in some unknown place, in some unknown time, will have an effect on blah blah blah. So it's already. I mean, and what I'm I guess what I'm saying is that kind of what saves us in LCA is that the ambition is also simply to say, well, the LCA should be better than nothing, basically. I mean, to say that we're 100% accurate in LCA would probably be to overestimate a little bit. So my question is, I mean, wouldn't that be kind of the first approach, simply to say, okay, let's just, I mean, do whatever kind of the same, and then we can always try to add complexity. Of course, that is something that we know which is out there and which should gradually be incorporated. But is it really kind of do you really see it as the kind of the important thing to look into?
I think that we need to distinguish two different levels. As you said, LCA is just complex enough, and it's a very detailed approach. due simplification, and we have it, we can already apply it. So the lifecycle sustainability framework is perfect. I mean, we can apply already because we have 3 different methods. So with all the simplification we adopt, we can just start already making sustainability assessment evaluation with a lifecycle-based approach. What I would like to say is that we can't just stop our effort to this level. We need to move up, because sustainability problems are also elsewhere, not just at the micro level. So what can we do to address this problem at other level? LCA provide a framework useful for doing this because of all the main features mentioned above. But LCA has been already expanded a lot in order to take into account some complexity, but life-cycle-based methods, life-cycle assessment, life-cycle costing, and social life-cycle assessment are probably not enough. We need to also consider other type of methods. It could be integrated within the framework. So I'm not just saying that LCA could be useful for any kind of assessment independently from the level of analysis. What I say is that at the micro-level product, we have already a framework, we can apply it, further developed, of course, in terms of social aspects and so on. But if you want to move the assessment to higher level, and what I say is that we need also to move the assessment at the higher level, we need to further develop methods. And these methods could be, some of these could be those already available in terms of further advancement of LCA. The consequential, for example, I think could be a suitable method for just try incorporating some concepts, but we need, of course, also to borrow methods developed in other fields, because otherwise we can't solve the complexity we have to handle.
Yeah, one last question.
It's a mix. My name is Kim Christensen. I work with Danish Standards. I used to work with Bo Weidema in 2005, 2006, where basics of what was presented earlier was developed. What I would like to ask you is the ISO 26000 International Guidance Standard on Social Responsibility was the standardization answer to sustainability assessment. At the point of time when it was decided to do the work, we couldn't agree to do sustainability assessment, so we did social responsibility instead. Out of that 5-year process, and 400 to 500 experts participated, we developed a list of 37 social responsibility issues. Did you address that list in your analysis?
We didn't. Well, I got your point. We didn't address specifically those lists in the analysis. What I would like to point it out that's we need to how to say, we can't rely only on what we have available so far. So this is, of course, a useful approach, but at the same time, we need to recognize that what we available is just already a first step in the whole process. So we can apply, but we need to move on. I didn't have a look at the list, so we probably provide a further inputs, but the approach is exactly the same. So consider also what could be the relevant aspects to be considered when we look at the whole system, because sustainability needs to be defined at a higher level. And then we need to find a way to, how to say, to cascade down this micro-level effect into the single product. But yes, I agree. Thanks for the suggestion.
Wednesday morning at 9 I will do a presentation on sustainability and standards, but most of you will be sleeping after the dinner. So I thought I should mention it today. The 37 issues are more out, you could say, of a qualitative perspective or semi-quantitative perspective. We did actually cross-cut this with the Global Reporting Initiative and their 70+ indicators, and we saw that the 37 issues are quite comprehensive from that perspective also. So it would be very nice if somebody could look a little more into that. The other key characteristic of ISO 26000 is actually the stakeholder engagement. So I'm quite happy to see that that's on the list also.
The problem is that how we bring all this together within the framework and how we can support the evaluation with, I wouldn't say a quantitative assessment, but at least a semi-quantitative one.